Hey there! Welcome to part 2 of my amazing comic book predictions video. It's 20 industry happenings I guarantee will occur between now and San Diego Comic-Con 2021. Now, if you did not see part 1, which covers predictions 1 through 8, there is a link in the description below. If you did watch that video, then you know I promised to pick up in this one by revealing the launch of a brand new comic book company, one that actually could overtake Marvel and DC in terms of both sales and popularity. That's partly because, although it's not using any of them right now, this company actually already owns the third largest stable of comic book characters. You think you know who it is? All right, stick around. Let's see if you're right. Hey there, Bobby. Welcome to Shanghala. My name is Duke, and we are about to pick up with my amazing comic book predictions. Thanks for watching. Please be sure to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, whether you agree with any of my predictions or even if you just think I've gone far out space nuts and I'm way out in the williwacks. But let's not waste any time. Let's get this ride in motion. So please fasten your seatbelts, keep your hands and arms inside the viewing area at all times, and please, no flash photography for the duration of this video.
Number 9.
In the last video, we spoke about the need to protect and preserve intellectual property and about how, in order for that IP to be viable as a merchandising opportunity, it needs to remain visible within the marketplace. Comic books, as we discussed, are an easy and cheap way of doing that. Therefore, as DC Comics / Warner Pictures / AT&T makes the moves I predicted in the last video, and as Marvel / Disney follows suit, look for Comcast to get a little nervous about being potentially blocked out of the pop culture space and to begin doing the same. And yes, I did say Comcast, because through the DreamWorks Classics Media subsidiary of its NBC Universal division, Comcast is practically drowning in IP. IP that is doing it absolutely no good in the marketplace, and it's all stuff that either comes from or would be perfect for comic books. Now, as I said in the teaser, Comcast does own what I'm pretty sure is the third largest stable of comic book characters. Its inventory includes, just to name a few, the Harvey Comics catalog, so that's Casper, Richie Rich, Baby Huey. It owns Jay Ward properties, that's Bullwinkle, Dudley Do-Right. It owns the Total Television characters, that's Underdog, Tennessee Tuxedo. It has all the Gold Key and Western properties, so Magnus, Turok, Dr. Solar. It owns Mr. Magoo, Lassie, the Lone Ranger, Felix the Cat, all the Tribune Media characters, so that's Dick Tracy, Brenda Starr, Broomhilda. It has the Filmation catalog. There's He-Man, Brave Star, Space Academy, Jason of Star Command, the original Ghostbusters, and all the heroes of the Super 7 lineup. And this is all without even broaching adaptations of all the properties it owns via content created for the Sci-Fi Channel and, of course, NBC. That's a lot of crap. It's just sitting around collecting dust when it could be piling up those merchandising dollars. So I predict the big announcement at the 2021 San Diego Comic-Con will be the launch of a new comic book company, one I'm predicting will go by the DBA of the Universal Comics Group. And just as I spoke in the last video about, AT&T putting vending machines for DC Comics in various Walmarts, I think Universal will actually beat Marvel to the vending machine punch, and it will put those units in, of course, all of the Universal theme parks, and probably some national store chain like Target, and at least one large grocery store chain. So, I can foresee a cover with maybe a bar across the top, like the old Marvel Comics Group bar that would say Universal Comics Group. And in the corner box, it would be branded with the imprint. Rather, it's Harvey, Tribune, Gold Key, Classics Media, whatever it might be. But there is one more brand that it could include, one we haven't mentioned yet, and that will do in
Number 10.
So, I predict that within the next year, somebody is going to buy Sid and Marty Krofft Productions, and I expect, if my previous prediction holds out, that somebody will be Comcast through its NBC Universal division. That's because while this proposed Universal Comics group has plenty of characters just right for kids, like Casper and Richie Rich, and not a few best aimed at older kids and fanboys like the Gold Key heroes, it doesn't really have anything to fit that hole that is the tween market. And that's a niche Croft could settle into perfectly. First as comic books to rebuild the brand in the public consciousness, but then as toys, games, movies, and TV shows. The things that Comcast would really want to hit. So, I mean, consider as far as the comics would go, oh man, think about this lineup. All right. Land of the Lost by Frank Cho, Slee Stacks by Alan Davis, H.R. Pufnstuf by Scotty Young, Witchy Poo by Gustavo Duarte, Electra Woman and Dyna Girl by Kevin McGuire, maybe a Dyna Girl solo book by Amanda Connor, an Electra Woman solo by Terry Dodson, The Pair Again in a Croft Super Show anthology drawn by Adam Hughes, and then there's The Bugaloos by Mike Allred, Lost Saucer and Dr. Shrinker by Steve Rude, Magic Mongo and Wonderbug by Ty Templeton, Bigfoot and Wild Boy by Evan Dorkin, and of course, Sigmund and the Sea Monsters by Eric Powell. Brother, I swear to you this. That's a lineup I would knock down your grandmother to get at. So the Croft characters are there, ripe for the picking. It's just a matter of who bids first and or highest. But moving on.
Number 11.
Okay, so we've talked about the need to get comic books back in the eyes of the general public and how vending machines can play a part in that. But another likely outlet could be Amazon. I predict we will see comic book companies soon selling not just trade paperbacks and graphic novels on Amazon, but also subscriptions to regular monthly comic books. The so-called floppies. And once again, I think DC will take the lead given that it has of late been the most aggressive in trying to resuscitate what many claim is a dying industry. Also, AT&T really needs to get HBO Max on the Kindle Fire, and to that end, comic book subscriptions is a cookie it could throw in to help sweeten the pot. Now, Amazon won't really care about the revenue to be made from selling comic books. That's a drop in the bucket so far as it's concerned. Less than a drop. It's a droplet. But even if AT&T bit the bullet and offered DC Comics to Amazon essentially at cost, Amazon would still sniff and shrug. But what Amazon wants is not the money to be made from selling comic book subscriptions. What it really wants, that's what will entice it to make the deal, and that's the idea of comic book subscriptions. Because comic book subscriptions will mean two things to Amazon: regular transactions and early adoption. So what does that mean? Well, think about it. If Amazon knows it will be shipping a packet of comics to some household every month for a year, it can stuff that envelope with all kinds of flyers, coupons, special offers. It's marketing to a known customer. And buddy, that's as close to a guaranteed sale as you can get. What's more, if some kid is waiting at the mailbox once a month for Amazon, or maybe once a week, if they can talk mom and dad into buying more than one subscription, you not only build brand loyalty, you normalize that transaction. That's important to Amazon because it makes buying from Amazon an ingrained habit. That kid grows up without even thinking twice about, this is just how I obtain my goods and products. So Amazon subscription offers coming to an inbox near you. In fact, within the next year, it would not surprise me to see certain high-profile YouTubers saying, this video is sponsored by the Amazon Comics Clearinghouse. Subscribe to your favorite comic book on Amazon and get 30% off cover price, blah, 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 blah. And yes, DC will take a hit on its take, a hard hit. And as I've intimated, it might even have to let those comics go to Amazon at cost. But think about it. If hawked by Amazon, the typical comic book title would just about double in circulation, maybe even better than that. Batman could easily go overnight from selling 80,000 copies per month to 160,000, $200,000. And what that means is DC could make up the losses on its piece of the cover price pie by actually selling ads inside the book, boosting the ad rate from the anemic current rate of less than 10% back up to, where it belongs, around 33% or so. So I think this is something that's going to be the wave of the future. But moving on.
Number 12.
I just don't see crowdfunding taking off. I know there are a lot of people hailing it as a savior of the industry, maybe even soon to be the only way to produce and sell comic books, but I really see it leveling off. The problem is that crowdfunding appeals to a niche group, and that's the opposite of what the publishers want. Publishers, or more properly, their corporate parents, they know that crowdfunding is, in a practical sense, little different than comic book shops. You need to get your product in front of a general audience, the widest possible segment of the marketplace, and generally speaking, most people won't work to find a comic book. And I have heard Ethan Van Sciver acknowledge that he's not putting out a comic book in the traditional sense. He himself has said he's marketing a kind of limited edition collectible. So, basically, he's selling custom Beanie Babies or Hummel figurines. He's selling a limited product to a limited audience, one that has to know it wants that thing that he's selling and is willing to seek it out. Now, yes, he does well. He will continue to do well, and good for him. A lot of crowdfunders, of comic skaters, they will continue to do well. But see, there's a question of value for the normie out there. And really for me, I've said online that, I don't want to pay $25 for a comic book, even one that's 80 pages. And comic skaters come back at me and they say, well, it's not just the comic. You also get this and that and the other damn thing. But, trading cards and stickers, that stuff is just clutter to me. And, if the campaign doesn't make its stretch goals, I don't even get that. And then the second most common response that I get is, and I get this a lot, is that, if we don't support Cyberfrog, the SJWs win. Well, that doesn't move me. Even if the social justice warriors do win and succeed in turning every surviving comic book into a steaming pile of woke garbage, hey, I've still got back issues. Even with a collection of 26,000 comic books, there are enough back issues still left out there to keep me in new reading material, or new to me anyway, for the rest of my natural life. But I think the biggest reason why crowdfunding will plateau over the next year is that, well, one, more people will try it, which will dilute the pool of available buyers. And two, the most successful crowdfunding books seem to have a tie of some sort to Comicsgate. And here's the thing about Comicsgate. Well, I personally agree with its stated goals to get identity politics out of comic books. That anti-woke stance has become in and of itself a political movement of its own. There are many who support Comicsgate books more for what they represent than for what they actually are. And I know saying this will probably put me under the social media dog pile, but that's my observation. And as comics publishers excise the wokeness in order to move toward the middle and appeal to, or at least not actively alienate, a general audience, that's going to take a lot of the wind out of the Comicsgate sales. And don't get me wrong, as I've said, again, Ethan Van Sciver will continue to do well. Others will do well, but just as there's a giant pyramid to what sells on QVC, and this is pretty much what crowdfunding is. It's basically an online QVC channel, frankly. The occasional hit amid lots of other stuff that comes and goes, that's pretty much what Indiegogo is. Crowdfunding can be big, but it's not a growth industry. You've got a few hits and then kind of a lot of stuff at the bottom. So again, I think it's going to plateau. I do not think crowdfunding is the future of the industry. But hey, let's move on to
Number 13.
So what is the future of the industry? Well, I think it's another case of what is not, and that is digital comics also are not a growth industry. If you look at the sales of comics in 3 formats over the last 5 years or so, the traditional floppies have seen some minor growth. Graphic novels have seen a lot more, albeit most of that I think is driven by Scholastic. But digital has been cardiac flat. All right, there's been no growth at all in digital online comic books. Yes, there are some people who do prefer digital comics, but most, the vast majority, do prefer physical media. And that's true of all reading material, really. I mean, prose books never really took off in digital format. Although, as with comics, I think a lot of that stagnation has been due to unreasonable prices demanded for an ethereal product, something that's not actually real, doesn't exist, and can be lost, changed, or taken away at any time. But even web comics, which are largely free, they've just never really taken hold either. So my prediction is that Comixology will go the way of MySpace, and while more than a few attempts will be made to replicate and or replace it, all will have about as much staying power as Google+. That said, I do foresee a place in digital for comic book archives. We all know the DC Universe app is about to get folded into HBO Max, at least the video component. But what about the comics? I can foresee that also getting folded in as a kind of in-app purchase. For example, you watch the Jonah Hex movie, although I have no idea why you would want to do that, but let's say you do. Well, then the HBO Max algorithm might offer you access to any number of Jonah Hex comic books at different, price ranges, or for a couple of bucks extra per month on top of the regular price for HBO Max, you could get access to the full DC archive. And the same could well happen over at Disney Plus with it integrating the Marvel Universe app. Or at the Peacock app, if Universal Comics becomes a thing, it could fold in all the old Gold Key comics. Again, it's kind of an add-on to the app rather than a separate standalone app. I mean, after all, from their perspective, which is better? Printing a $120 omnibus of New Teen Titans that will sell to a few hundred people, maybe a few thousand people, or pushing that same material in digital format for, an extra buck or two and hooking tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions of people to, and here's the important thing, a recurring monthly fee. That's kind of a no-brainer. So, moving on to another no-brainer. As enthralling as these predictions are, I'm fairly certain you're not going to sit through for more than 15 minutes of me at a time. So I think we'll cut things here. Please do come back for the third and final installment of these predictions when I'll tell you what's going to happen, good and bad, to Image Comics. Until then, goodbye, good luck, and please be good to each other.